Hey there, and welcome back to B.Hooked, the place where you and I together turn yarn into anything we want, hobby or lifestyle. Now, in today's episode, I want to share with you one of my absolute favorite crochet stitches, the V puff stitch. So we'll see in the tutorial that this is a really simple stitch pattern repeat. First thing I want to do is talk to you about the foundation row and the stitch multiple that you need to work in when you're planning your projects with the V puff stitch. You can use it for a variety of different projects. You can actually even tailor the puff stitches to how thick you want your fabric to be. More loops equals a thicker fabric, fewer loops equals a more drapey fabric. Now you can also play a lot with the yarn to get a really great outcome. Now I am also using one of my all-time favorite yarns for this demonstration here, and that is Red Heart Boutique Unforgettable Yarn. This yarn is life for me. I have created so many projects using this yarn. They come out with brand new colorways all the time, and it's impossible for me to pinpoint just one of those colorways that I love the most. So now the first thing we want to do is create a slip knot and work up a foundation chain. Now, if you're working in a flat piece like we'll be demonstrating here in the tutorial, you'll work a foundation chain that's a multiple of 4 plus 10. That's a little different if you're working in the round, so in that case you'll do a multiple of 4 plus 1. Now since we are working with puff stitches, what I recommend doing is having a foundation row of some other kind of stitch before you start this V puff stitch. And the reason for that is although we can work a puff stitch into any one of these chains, it really stretches things out and then the bottom edge looks a little wonky. So what I like to do is start off with a foundation row of single crochet. Now in this case, we'll go ahead and single crochet in our second chain from the hook. You can work in any part of the chain that you prefer. I'm just going to catch this top loop to make things a little easier. And we'll just make one single crochet in every stitch. So this is what our foundation row looks like before we move into the first row of our stitch pattern repeat. Now keep in mind that you can use other stitches for this foundation row if you prefer a half double crochet or a double crochet. You can do either of those. However, just know that you will have to make an adjustment to the foundation chain number. So because we worked in single crochets here, we added one chain to the multiple that we need for the V puff stitch. If you are working with half double crochets, you'll add 2 chains. Double crochets, you'll add 3 chains to that repeat. You can find all of that information on the written instructions as well, so I want to direct you to that page once again, and now let's move into the first row. So because we're working in rows, we do need to have an edge on either side in order to make things nice and clean. And for this demonstration, I like to use a double crochet. It works out really well, so I will chain 3. That is going to act as one double crochet. I'll turn my work and then set myself up for the V puff stitch pattern repeat. So since this chain 3 counts as a double crochet, we're not going to start with this stitch here, but we want to skip 3 of the next. So we have 1, 2, and 3 we're going to skip, and in that 4th, here is our stitch pattern repeat, or our sequence. We're going to do a puff stitch, a chain 1, and a puff stitch. Now to work a puff stitch, we want to wrap the yarn around our hook, insert it into that stitch. I've caught both loops of the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. And here's the trick. We want to pull this nice and tall, get some slack on that working yarn so we have a nice puffy puff stitch. Now we'll do that several more times. So that was the first time. We'll wrap the yarn, insert our hook, pull up a loop again. That's number 2. Wrap the yarn, insert the hook, pull it up for number 3, wrap the yarn, do it again for number 5. Now to finish the puff stitch, we'll wrap the yarn and we need to pull through all of these loops that are on our hook. This isn't really an easy task, I'll be honest. What I like to do is orient my hook so that it's pointed downwards so that it naturally wants to fit through there a little bit easier. And just take it nice and slow. Usually if you leave the slack relatively loose on this, you'll find that it'll slide right through. Sometimes you'll need to catch that last one there by itself. And to finish it off, we'll chain 1. That will finish this puff stitch. Now if you remember, our sequence is puff, chain 1, puff. So we need to make one more chain. That's going to be the space in between, kind of creating the V look. And then we'll puff stitch again in the same stitch. So wrap the yarn, pull up a loop. We want to do that 5 times total. Wrap the yarn, pull through all of our loops, chain 1 to finish it off. So there we can already see the stitch pattern starting to take shape. We've got 2 puffs and they are situated like a V. So our repeat for the rest of this row is really simple. We're going to skip 1, 2, 3, and then work our puff stitch sequence here in the 4th stitch. So remember what that is? Puff, chain 1, puff. And chain 1 to finish it off. Now we'll just repeat that until we get to the end of the row. We should end with 3 stitches remaining. We'll meet back up at the end of this row and I'll demonstrate exactly how to finish off the row. Now when you get to the end of your row and you have 4 stitches remaining, we're going to skip 3, so 1, 2, and 3, and we'll double crochet in the last. And this is what our work looks like at the end of our first row. So as we move on to row number 2, we're not really changing much in terms of the stitch repeat, but it looks a little different because now we're working in a row of puff stitches. So we'll start the row the same, chain 3, we'll turn our work, and then we don't really have to count stitches anymore. We can kind of just eyeball it at this point. Find your first V puff stitch and the chain space in between there. That's where we want to work our next puff stitch sequence. So that is puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch. Then we'll work our puff stitch in that same space. Chain 1. And that's our repeat. We'll find the next V puff stitch, we'll work our sequence there. So puff stitch, chain 1, puff stitch. And when you get to the end of your row, you'll find your 3rd chain, which is right here, and we'll double crochet there to finish off the row. Now that you've had a little practice with the V puff stitch, in the comments section below, I want you to tell me 2 things. The first thing, what would you like to create? What type of project would you like to create with this stitch? And number 2, tell me your favorite color of Red Heart Boutique Unforgettable yarn. There are so many colorways. and I love them all. I know it's hard to put your finger on just one, but if you had to, which color would it be, and what project would you make with it? Tell me in the comments section below. I look forward to serving you in the next tutorial of B.Hooked. If you haven't subscribed to the show already, please do so. You're in the right place if you love knitting and you love crochet and you want to turn yarn into anything you want, whether that be a hobby or a lifestyle. That's where it's at.